Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name is Clint, and I'm a very grateful alcoholic. And it really truly is an honor to be here. It's an honor to be asked to share at any AA meeting. Boy, and especially this, the spirit and the fellowship is alive and well here. I can feel it. And it's a good feeling. And I'll share about this in a second. But 95% of the AA meetings that I go to, by the time I leave, I know exactly why I've been. And I had that experience tonight. I swear to you I did, and I will share about it later. I'm in awfully good hands in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I know that. And I know that God picked me up by the scruff of the neck and kept dropping me in here until I stayed. I didn't stay at my first AA meeting. Alcoholics Anonymous for me is like special ed. I don't know about you, what era you went to high school. I graduated high school in 1977. I went to Burroughs High School in Burbank. And special ed was like right next door to the journalism department. And it was simple. Special ed is where all the flunkies, where they put all the flunkies. I know it's changed, and I've had people come up to me in this day and age and take offense that I use the term special ed to describe Alcoholics Anonymous. But my experience is that the people in special ed just were not quite fitting in. And that's exactly me. You see, I've had a lot of experiences in my life. I've lived not just a fast lane life, but in many respects an exotic life, and to a certain degree sort of a special life. And yet I didn't know how to live. I was really a screw up. I genuinely, I was working professionally for 14 years when I started drinking at the age of 16 years old. And I had a lot of wonderful experience, and yet I was not functioning. I was not okay. I was not normal. I needed special ed. And for me, like I said, God picked me up by the scruff of the neck and kept dropping me in AA, God's special education class. For all of us rejects that just couldn't quite get along in the normal life, And I am so genuinely grateful that it happened the way it happened. Because I am living a very, very comfortable life. I am living a life that I will gladly take. I'll take this. And that doesn't mean that my life doesn't come without problems, that my life, I don't have, issues. I've got tissues for your issues. I heard that in an AA meeting over on the west side. It was kind of funny, the way the fellow said it. I've got tissues for your issues. But I know what I am. I'm an alcoholic. I believe I was born an alcoholic. And I believe it just took that first incident of alcoholic drinking. It took that first moment of really pouring it down my gullet for alcoholism to bloom. But from that point forward, at about the age of 15 or 16 years old, I was an alcoholic. And I drank and used for 15 years really hard. And I don't know whether it knocked years off my life. I would have to bet that it did. But I went at it awfully hard, and I don't want to be dramatic and say I almost died. But I was in a lot of sketchy situations, and I poisoned my body pretty darn good. And, of course, all the miscellaneous things that go on, like having guns pointed at you and, driving when you're absolutely blotto and just, remarkable things happening to where you don't die. And the fact that I survived, I didn't realize it at the time, but I know that was God-related. It was not just a series of, random coincidences that kept me alive until when I finally got into the halls of AA. But first of all, let me back up for a second. I love the word seasoning. What is that? Where are you, Ben? Where have you been? Yeah, drugs were like seasoning. Well, I put a whole lot of seasoning on my shit. There were times I had more seasoning than steak. I know what I am. I'm an alcoholic. When my alcoholism blossomed, it was much easier for me to buy a bag of weed than it was for me to get somebody to buy me a 12-pack or buy me a bottle of booze. So just to be honest, I cut my teeth, smoking dope, and I progressed onward and upward to you name it. I did it. But the seasoning is great. And, I am going to try to temper my seasoning remarks tonight because out of respect to Alcoholics Anonymous, by the end for me it was Fleischmann's vodka. I'd get a pint of Fleischmann's vodka and a can of Diet Pepsi. And it would help if I had ice cubes. And I could mix up some cocktails. I could pour myself 2 or 3 good cocktails with a pint of Fleischmann's vodka and a can of Diet Pepsi. It's an alcoholic. It's not normal drinking. From the first time I poured alcohol into my system, for the first time I put seasoning on my steak, I wasn't normal. I got to tell this story. I was about 14 years old or 15 years old, and I hadn't yet smoked pot. But I had a good friend of mine who had older brothers, and they were pot smokers. And we heard that they were going to kick us down some weed. And like one weekend came and went, and it didn't happen. And either the stuff was too good and they wanted to keep it for themselves, or whatever the story was, we didn't get it one weekend. We were supposed to get some weed the next weekend. And I was in such anticipation of getting high that come Wednesday or Thursday, I took the pencil shavings from my pencil sharpener and twisted up a fatty. That's not normal. I also, the fellow who read the 12 Traditions, that ain't nothing. I actually said God could and would if he were shot one time. And I stayed sober. I'm experiencing, just as a human being, a great life. But, you know, I hit middle age in sobriety. And just to be honest, the last couple of years have been a little uncomfortable for me. And there's really no joke about this. It's just, listen, every year for me since I got sober, I was 32 years old, I think, when I got sober. June 14th, 1991, the Burbank Group of Alcoholics Anonymous, the sobriety capital of the world. Don't you ever forget it. Jim Baker taught me that. My sobriety has been wonderful. And yet, I'm beginning to face things, and I'm beginning to process stuff like, you know, when I went through, like, my late 30s and early 40s, literally on a honeymoon, and everything was cooking along and going great, and you know, I don't know, I think my participation in Alcoholics Anonymous and me being sober and involved and very comfortable in my own skin, I sort of missed the beginning of middle age. And a couple of years ago, and it started with the death of my sobriety cat. I had a cat named Sam. It's been 2 or 3 years ago. He finally got old and passed away. And he watched me get loaded. Sam was an old cat that you know, I got him when I was still getting loaded, and then I sobered up, and we carried on and had this wonderful life. And he watched me get married, and Melanie is my wife, and she's in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she came with a cat, so we had this cat family. But Sam was with me through all these years, and then Sam got old and passed away. And it was weird. I don't know, probably there's a lot of people who can relate to the whole animal thing. But the trigger of Sam passing really sort of made me sort of realize, wow, you know. I turned around and I realized I'm over 40. And I know for a lot of people they'll say, shut up, you're young. But just the whole middle age thing, you know, I'm having to deal with it. I'm also having to deal with some medical issues that I'll talk about in a minute, and it's not anything dramatic. Of course, my brain would love me to make it dramatic, but I'm going to deal with stuff. But you know, the wonderful thing about Alcoholics Anonymous, and listen, I heard it, I've experienced it, and now I'm continuing to get to experience at a whole different level, is that I'm able to use this program while maintaining sobriety and dealing with problems that, you know, that civilians out there have to deal with. Then they don't have a program. I love that expression, civilians. I don't know about normies. I don't know who normal is. But I know a civilian. The civilian is the fellow that can, you know, like drink a beer and leave a little bit of it at the bottom of the glass. For crying out loud. That's insane. Just, you know, but for me, and I'm real close. I'm still very close to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm very close to my home group, and I'm close to my fellows in the program. You know, I think it's really important to. God, now I'm going to sound like I'm telling you what to do. For me, staying in the middle of the fellowship, staying in the middle of the Burbank group has been important for me. Because for whatever reason, you know, I heal quicker when I'm at a meeting. I heal quicker when I'm around recovery. And I don't mean alcoholism. I mean just me processing stuff, me processing life, sadness, pain, disappointment, you know, the beginnings of arthritis, liver trouble. Let me just go ahead and share this now. I've had my liver numbers spike up recently, and I've changed doctors. I didn't change doctors. I got referred to another specialist on top of a specialist I was going to. And all of them looked me in the eye and say, "You don't drink, do you?" Because they know, they read my chart. And I say, "No." And they go, "That's good. You're going to live a nice long life." Now, there are steps that I'm going to have to take here that scare me. There are steps I'm going to have to take in the next period of my life that, you know, for treatment of my liver disease. And it's going to mean me taking shots and taking pills regularly and me getting treated regularly. And it's something I've known about since early in my sobriety. And my liver doctor just said, you know, just watch it. Don't drink. We'll keep an eye on your numbers. And I had one really wonderful liver doctor who said, you know, listen, about every 10 years they they cycle in a new set of therapies. Let's just wait and see if your numbers are okay. By the time you might need treatment, there might be a new set of therapies. Well, looks like that, you know, it's going to happen for me here real soon. And that's what, when I mentioned today, I know I'm in the right place because I was at a meeting and I talked to two people in this meeting that have had the same experience that I'm getting ready to go through. And I know one of the people I was talking to, and I had no idea, of course. And they both chimed in with really good, positive stuff, you know. And it made me breathe a little easier. You too? God, that happens a lot here in AA. Oh, you too? Yeah, let me tell you about my thing. I had that happen to me early in sobriety, and when it came to real official insanity. And I was talking about the aliens conspiring with the mafia to take over the world. And a guy said to me, oh, you too, huh? And he shared with me, he said, just relax. It took him about 7 years before the flashbacks sort of went away. And you know what? He was right. He was right. I've gotten very little poor information in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't tell you that every piece of information I've ever gotten in an AA meeting has been good as gold, because that would be lying. And my sponsor has always told me to be as honest as I possibly can be when I share. And you know, I've heard some lame brain stuff at an AA meeting. You know, I've had people try to sell me stuff, or I've had people go off on rants and talk about stuff that I've said, okay, well, that's not gold. But just the vast majority of the real stuff that I've gotten in AA meetings has been dynamite. And like I said, I've lived a pretty exotic life, and I'll go into it here in a second. And I've never gotten anything close to the valuable, wonderful, unforgettable information, the nuggets of how to live a life. I've never gotten it anywhere else better than in AA. And I've been around a lot of exotic people. See, I don't know. I started acting professionally when I was 2 years old. I come from an entertainment family. I've got an older brother who was a very successful child actor, and he didn't catch alcoholism. He caught working hard. I remember the day that we sort of went our different ways, because we wrote a script together and did a TV movie together back in 1978, which was like right after high school, right at the beginnings of really my full blossoming alcoholism and seasoning. And he kept his nose to the grindstone, and I decided to take a vacation. And I literally thought I was going to just take about a month or two off. God, that was I literally didn't really come out of it at all for about 2 years. You know. And meanwhile, my brother Ron, very focused man, kept his eye on the ball, kept his eye on what he wanted to do. And he's got, you know, those gold statues that they hand out in March. He's got a few ducats in the bank, and he's gotten to do what he wants to do, and he's a very happy guy. I'll tell you what, too, in all sincerity, he's really, really happy that I'm sober. And he's really, really happy that I found my way. He's 5 years older than me, and he watched me, you know, go through a tremendous amount of turmoil. And I still have this letter that he wrote me. I was about 5 or 6 months sober, and we had worked together on a project. And he wrote me a letter. It was on the stationery of a hotel that he was staying at in New York, and he handed me the letter the day that I was wrapping the shoot and flying home, and I read it on the airplane. I still have the letter. It just, he's so great. He said he was so grateful, so happy to see me happy and doing well. And and I swear to God, this might make me cry. He said he was really glad to have his brother back. I have one more little heartfelt thing that I've got to share about, and that is my mom. You know how I said originally that I was born an alcoholic? Well, my mom passed away a few years ago. My mom's father was a dyed-in-the-wool alcoholic that died prematurely at about the age of 55. His name was Butch. He ran a butcher shop and not a supermarket, a store, a food store in Duncan, Oklahoma. And I didn't know too much about Grandpa Butch, except I looked an awful lot like him. And I've learned later that my dad told me a story that Grandpa Butch, when Dad showed up married for the first time with my mom and visited the family, that the first thing Grandpa Butch asked my dad was, do you think you could loan him a couple bucks so he could go down and get him a bottle? And this was like back in the 40s, and see, Grandpa Butch was not allowed to drink in the house. But he found a new mark. He found a son-in-law who he could sucker into going and getting him a bottle. Well, my mom suffered through a lot with her father, and the fact that I did look an awful lot like him. And my mom watched me go through the throes of alcoholism full-born. 2 drug treatment programs, never prison, but in jail a few times, and a lot of trouble and financial wreckage, and a first marriage that was not pretty. It was a poisonous, diseased marriage, and my mom went through a lot of heartache. I can only imagine. Well, I got sober. And I was sober for 9 years when my mom passed away. And on her deathbed, she was in the hospital bed at St. Joseph's Hospital, and she wasn't getting out. She had heart problems, and she was slowly going to pass away. We were sort of taking turns visiting, and my mom caught me one afternoon, and she says, our family's done a lot of really wonderful things, but the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that you got sober. And I could tell by the look in her eye that it was the truth. And I can just imagine that all the turmoil that she went through, like I said, with her father and then with me, to see me finally achieve some permanent sobriety. June 14th, 1991 is, and I remember that. And also, I'm grateful to get to share. I'm not a circuit speaker. I get to share from time to time because of, Gentle Ben or whatever. But I like to share this stuff at the podium because it makes me remember, because I won't go through my day and think about Mom and how she looked me in the eye, and saying how proud she was of me. That doesn't cross my mind. But it's a story that I share with you folks, and it's great for me to hear. It really is cathartic for me to share at an AA meeting. Also, too, as you can see, I bounce around some. I chit-chat here. I talk about this. I try to keep an open mind when I come in to share because, listen, I know that I'm supposed to hold your attention and I'm supposed to share experience, strength, and hope. But I'm also up here doing this for me, And I always feel better. I always feel better after I share. Not because I make people laugh. It's not about that. It's the fact that if you knew where I came from, if you knew what a sick, puking lush I was, the fact that I can get up here and share from my heart and talk about my experiences, before sobriety, and then my early sobriety and my life now, it really is. This AA thing works. And all I can say is I know I'm a testament to it. Now, I started acting professionally when I was 2. And like I said, I told a little bit about my brother Ron. And, you know, we were an entertainment family. My dad is an actor. He's still alive. My mom had it in her blood to act, and she retired for a long time and then got back into it and acted quite a bit in her second life. You know, the last 15 or 20 years of her life, she acted. In fact, she played Grandma Lovell in Apollo 13. And we were all really proud that Mom, you know, actually, she had just had a major stomach surgery right before she did that scene. And as it turned out, it only made her look, you know, more like Grandma Lovell. Because the fact is, Ron was really sort of worried because Ron wanted to hire her to play Grandma Lovell in Apollo 13, but she wasn't quite old enough. Grandma Lovell, the history of that was she was really like 85 or 90 years old, and Mom was only like 65 at the time. But Mom had a major surgery about 2 months before, and it aged her. And anyway, I know she would have traded the surgery, the acting job for the surgery, you know. But Mom was Grandma Lovell in Apollo 13. But we were show business family, but we lived a very normal life. And Ron and I both owe that to both our parents, but especially Dad. My dad was a product of the Depression, and he taught us, he understood. I don't know how he figured it out, but he understood that, you know, show business is just a job. And it really is. It's just a job. It's a place where I can give someone my Social Security number, and they are going to give me gainful employment. You know, now I know that there are, what would be the term, some perks. Occasionally there's an upside to it, like, you know, a better seat at a restaurant or whatever. But it's a job. And Ron and I learned that at a very early age, that, you know, what we were doing as children is just a job. My dad pointed out to us that we had friends that worked in their parents' restaurants. We had friends that delivered papers. And it is no different. That we needed to be prepared and show up to work every day, ready to work. And my mom and dad were always on the set with us. And we were always given plenty of guidance. Plenty of, you know, times when we were told by our parents that you don't behave like the adults. You're a child. And I know that's one tricky thing about having children in the entertainment business, is that's the big trap, is that it's an adult world. And it's fine to put a child in an adult world, but it takes a tremendous amount of extra instruction and extra care. And I was given that instruction and care. And so, you know, I played Little League Baseball, Park League Basketball. I went to Burroughs High School. I went to all the same public schools that my brother went to. My parents thought it was really important that we live as normal a life as we possibly could, and we did. So I don't blame my childhood of acting. You know, I don't blame alcoholism on that at all. I worked steadily from the time I was her age. I had a television show when I was a little kid called Gentle Ben. It was back in the late 60s, and it was about a boy and a bear in the Florida Everglades, and it ran on Channel 13, you know, did reruns for years and years. We only filmed it for 2 seasons. But the show had some staying power, and you know, I worked on that. I did a lot of freelance acting. I was in a very famous episode of Star Trek when I was about 7 or 8 years old called The Corbinite Maneuver. So I had a very successful life as a child. I should have had a lot of really, like, strong self-esteem. Now, I realize that alcoholics don't have the market cornered on uncomfortable puberty. But, for whatever reason, I should have had really good self-esteem. You know, I should have been able to talk to girls. I should have felt comfortable around my peers. And when I hit about 14 years old, man, I got the uglies on the inside and out. I had pimples in my stomach and pimples on my face, and I hated it. I did not dig it. I had this big hole developing in my stomach. And you know, that's the one catch about being in the entertainment business, especially back in the 60s and the 70s. I watched a lot of adults drink heavily. And my parents are not alcoholic. They drank. My dad actually gave up drinking the very first time I went into recovery. He quit just out of respect to me. He's never had a drop since. That was 1984. And he put it down and says, "Oh, I feel better. I don't have that headache in the morning. You know, I don't have to worry about my weight." And he hasn't had a drop since. I didn't get it. Because, see, I didn't stay sober in 1984. But anyway, when I was going through puberty, I figured out how to fill that hole up in my gut. And I got very comfortable talking to girls. I found a crowd I could run with. And they weren't lower companions. They were different companions. They were the fun group. That's the one great thing about, you know, drinking. You know, you can kind of slide into any crowd. You know? The sports guys, yeah, they drank. The golf team, they drank. The Lodies, of course. Well, what do the Lodies do? But I immediately found it, you know, and I remember vividly the first time I went to one of those school parties and got loaded, got drunk. It was on that Boone's Farm wine or whatever it was, that kind of wine where you puke rainbow colors, real cheap, and it comes in the funky bottles, you know. And I drank, I puked, and I could not wait to do it again. And, you know, I found it. Now, I also had a wonderful excuse. See, because this was now 15, 16 years old. I had already been acting professionally for a long time, and my parents were really wonderful. They had saved my money for me, so I had some autonomy. I had some economic power, and I said, I deserve to drink. I've earned the right to... I was 16 years old, and I was saying to myself, I've earned the right to drink. Of course, I wasn't saying it to my parents. But in my head, I was saying, you know, listen, if I knew all my idols in the entertainment business, I knew that they got loaded, and you know, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. So the parade began. And I'm a pretty smart guy, and I managed to get through high school without too much trouble. You know, I was one of those guys that basically I was a B-plus student, and I didn't even really try. That was before I got loaded, you know. I like to do the stuff I like to do. I was a journalism student. I'm naturally a pretty gifted writer, and I did that stuff. I was a sports guy. I played sports. I played high school baseball. I managed to survive. I played as a junior, and then quit my senior year because I had some excuses, but it was, you know, beginning to get in the way of my drinking and seasoning. But my life quickly became all about setting it up so I could get loaded. And my schoolwork and my attendance. You know, I was smart enough to play the game, and I had a big brother who had gone through the same school, the same system as me, and I played that card to the hilt. I had an algebra class in high school, and in a semester, I still have the report card, in a semester I had 26 absences. And that's only for what, like, you know, 4 months? Shit, that's hardly ever going. You know, and I got a C+. I skated through. I learned how to cheat. The easier, softer way, you know. And I was setting myself up for a poisonous early 20s of drinking and getting loaded. And of course, I didn't get into a band. I started a band. You know, one of those garage bands, one of those punk bands in the late 70s and early 80s. That's a great excuse to get drunk. Having a band. I did that for a while. And I told everybody that I'm going to take it easy on the acting. I want to concentrate on the music. And I'm doing it with one of those plastic tumblers of 7 and 7. Here I was a kid. And all of a sudden I was taking up this sort of drinking lifestyle. And you know, I ran with a pretty exotic crowd. And I was very fortunate because I never did anything to absolutely, completely ruin my acting career. I'd always scare up a few acting jobs here and there. I worked some when I was in my early 20s. I was in a movie called Rock and Roll High School. I fit in really good there. And I did a movie called Evil Speak back in like 1980 that sort of gave me some traction to continue working in television and films. So even though I was not excelling in what I do for a living, I was surviving. And meanwhile, I was drinking, I was seasoning, and I was in this band. Well, by 1984, I was ready for my first treatment program, and I knew it. I went on my own volition to this place called Beverly Glen Hospital, and it was a wonderful treatment facility. It was 28 days, and they sold me a $10,000 big book. And I stayed sober for 9 months to the day. And I made the conscious decision at 25 years old that I wasn't done yet. And it was not a slip. I had thought about it for several weeks, and I made the conscious decision to drink, and I did. And it was just like you guys said. Gets worse, never better. It's a progressive disease. And I watched it. It was amazing. It was like, I had no relief. And I remember that first night pretty vividly. I drank some beers, smoked a little weed, went and got my chip. Don't want to forget that. Stopped at a liquor store on the way home and got the silver Smirnoff vodka, just a pint. Of course, I didn't get the regular vodka. I needed it with the extra kick, I drank 151 rum. Yeah, why not? It's good shit. It's got the extra kick. Well, anyway, that night, the day of my 9 months when I went out for the first time, I knew I had made a mistake. And I needed to go back to my home group, and I needed to raise my hand and say I was a newcomer, and I blew it. I knew it. I knew it. As I was passing out, I knew it. And I woke up in the morning with the efforts. Just one more day. One more day. And that was 4 more years of a lot of pain. You guys said it gets worse, never better. It's a progressive disease. And I have I'll do it briefly. I stepped right through the gates of insanity. I started smoking the seasoning. Let's just call it the top shelf seasoning. And the hard liquor, and the lifestyle, no food, craziness. I went nuts. I literally woke up one morning and I thought the aliens were conspiring with the mob to take over the world, and that I was at the center of it. I didn't want to be at the center of it, but I was. And I'll tell you why I knew I was at the center of it. See, I was born on Adolf Hitler's birthday. And when I was a child, I did an episode of Night Gallery where I predicted the end of the world. And that movie Evil Speak, I got possessed by the devil and I chopped off some heads. My keen mind that morning put it all together. I must be the Antichrist. And I sincerely, I didn't want to be the Antichrist. But they had to pick someone. And if you think about it, the little kid on Gentle Ben, he'd be a perfect Antichrist. And I didn't really feel good about it. And I also was having this other thing that sort of kind of comes attached with chemically induced schizophrenia. And then as you start to think that people can read your mind, and you start to think that people are following you around, that there was, I had it in my head that there was this band of gypsies that were like shapeshifters. They were people that they were aliens, but they could make themselves out to be like humans, and they could also make themselves out to look like people that I know. And that they were following me around, and that irritated me. But the reading my mind really irritated me a lot. Because what I thought, I really wouldn't want you to read my mind now. Well, right now it feels pretty good, but there are days you wouldn't want to read my mind. I actually had an incident where I was at a hotel, and a bellboy came up, a room service guy came up delivering ice cubes or something, the door got opened, and I looked at him, and I could tell that he was thinking bad thoughts about me, and I walked up and I cold cocked him. Because we were having this mental standoff. And then, of course, I really feel bad, man, and anyway, the cops came, all the seasoning got removed from the room. I got arrested down to the North Hollywood station, and I'm in the holding cell. And I do have memories of this, but it's sort of it's in and out memories, and you'll know why in a second. It includes a taser. But there was a guard staring at me, and I was staring at him, and he was giving me the eye, and I didn't like it because I was having a hard time reading his mind. I knew he could read mine. And with this sort of, smirk on his face and this cocksure sort of, deal, he walked up to the bars of the cell. And I spit on him. And the door got opened, and they fired on me. They fisted me, and then they tasered me. And listen, first of all, you spit on a cop, church is out. And I have had a moment of clarity. And I realized what he was looking at. He was looking at this poor bastard that he probably used to see on television. And he was probably looking at me with disdain. And he was probably going, "What, Jesus, I wish the guy would get his crap together." Of course, that's 20 years later I'm thinking this. But at the time I'm thinking, doesn't he know I'm an Antichrist? Well, anyway, they hit on me, and I don't think they needed to hit on me for too much. I just had a split lip, and I came to, and I was in this barber chair, and they were sewing me up, and I could swear they were planting this chip in my lip. And I thought, oh no, they've got me now. The next day or that night when I bailed myself out of jail, of course the first thing I went to was the seasoning shop. And of course at some of those establishments they have coffee tables with some loose change on them and some various stuff. And I found a real copper penny, an old copper penny. Now I have stitches in my lip on the inside and the out. But I get this brilliant idea that, this copper penny, I could deflect the signal. So I put the penny where you put dip, right here, and I feel this tingling sensation, and I'm thinking, it's working, it's deflecting the signal. Yeah, it's probably an infection setting in. God knows where this penny's been, and I'm sticking it in my mouth. Well, for a few months, until I went into my next treatment program, I was walking around intermittently taking this penny out of my mouth to let them read my mind, and then putting the penny back in to deflect the signal. Because I realized that the aliens did want to hear what I was thinking from time to time. I don't want to piss them off. The gates of insanity, as you guys read in the book, as I read in the book, I've been there. I know what insanity is. And I'm not trying to boast. And also I know that you know, insanity, I mean, here we've just had 10 or 15 minutes where we've had some laughs over it. Insanity's real and it's serious. And listen, I'm not a professional, but what I've learned is there's chemically induced schizophrenia and there's organic. And please, if you feel like you've got issues with reality, like boogeymen or aliens or conspiracies, first of all, if you're in the fellowship, it's wonderful. Mine didn't go away right away. Like I said, there was a fellow in Cocaine Anonymous that told me it took him about 7 years. And I was having flashbacks for several years. They wouldn't last very long, and I was taught how to process them. And I have not had to have, medication. But if mental illness is an issue, please go seek treatment. It's real. And my healing came about organically and in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I remember one more thing about it. When I first got sober at Burbank in 1991, they still had the paneling up on the walls. And right above the podium, they had a hole in the paneling. And I swear there was a camera. I swear it was a perfect little hole for a camera. And I knew that the aliens were there. I had one more trip into treatment. Now, I'd been to AA a few times. Because of course they hand you a $10,000 big book and you go to meetings, and so I had some experience with recovery through the 12 steps that they teach in these 28-day programs. And listen, I learned a lot of great information, and I experienced fellowship in 84, 87, 88. I didn't stay sober, but I was there. I was around. I was gaining information. But I was always about. It's a pretty good program, but they ought to make some adjustments. They could shave a couple of these steps down. I remember a famous one I share about from time to time. I identified right away what the problem was, and that is there's too much sugar. They need to have fruits and vegetables instead of cookies and fudge and stuff. I was all about tailoring the program to me. My early trips into recovery, I just wasn't ready. I wasn't willing. I wasn't willing to do it your way. Well, between like 89 and 90, my life just became just an old-fashioned drunken train wreck. I was virtually unemployable. I was walking around the streets of Burbank picking up aluminum and glass to supplement the little bit of money that would come in. I could get the big bottle of Fleischmann's vodka. All the seasoning had gone away. I was just drinking Fleischmann's vodka. And I was living about 200 yards downhill from the Burbank group when it was over on Angelino. And I didn't go to meetings or anything, but through a series of circumstances that I have to believe were God created, and it didn't have anything to do with the cops or anything, I ended up making a promise to my dad that I'd go to an AA meeting again. But a strange thing happened. Is the night before, I was drinking that Fleischmann's vodka, and it was one of those moments where I was so polluted that I became lucid again. It's that feeling where you can't really get buzzed and get loaded and smashed, but I drank myself sober. And I had this thought cross through my head. And it was not a voice. Again, honesty. I don't want to sound like it was, a voice from God, but it was this crystal clear thought that popped into my head, and I really do believe it came from my higher power. And that was, Clint, you're going to have to go to AA. You're going to have to give sobriety another try, and you're going to have to do it their way. And it was like that part, you're going to have to do it their way, was capitalized. And for whatever reason, that really stuck. Anyway, June 14th, 1991, it was a Friday night, and I don't remember. I looked it up recently. I do remember where I was sitting at the Burbank group over there on Angelino. I have a vivid memory where the podium was. I was right over there. I had a friend of mine come and take me. My dad made a couple of phone calls and had a buddy of mine who was a sober member of the program take me. And I got into the middle of the pack at the Burbank group, and it was pretty simple. I started doing it your way. I got a sponsor after a few weeks, but I got commitments right away. You know, we were still smoking, and they made me the ashtray cleaner. You know, and I washed coffee cups where you had to put the bleach in with the sudsy water and clean the cups and stuff. And you know what? I guess I was just done. Because we had a good friend of mine who passed away a few years ago, a guy named Keats. We were really, really close at the Burbank group. And Keats always used to put it really well. He goes, you know, when you skid along bedrock long enough, maybe you're just beaten into a state of reasonableness. And I had skidded along that bedrock for quite a while. And I wish I knew that, you know, I mean, I'm talking about willingness, that I was willing to do it your way. But I honestly don't know why. Because I had been in treatment before, you know. And to be honest, it wasn't like that first day in June of 1991, June 14th, that my motives were pure and that this was a newfound beginning for me. You know, to be honest, I had made a deal with my dad. I was kind of getting the heat off a little bit. You know, it wasn't like my motives were pure. But what I did was different, and that was I got into the middle of the pack, and I hung out at Burbank. And it was more than just hanging out. I really took the steps. And that third step I took over and over and over with a sincerity that I do remember. I remember how much I said, God, I'm making this decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of you. Look what I've done to myself. I realized what I had done. I had a lot of promise. And I had done a piss-poor job. I had made a mockery of my life. And I don't know, I had hope. And then the members of the Burbank group, they nurtured that hope with their enthusiasm and their wisdom. And I learned so much wonderful stuff in my life in AA. You know, my sponsor has been wonderful. He taught me about patience, which to me is the most, you know, to me patience is my most important, or impatience is my most important character defect. I can be impatient to the point of anxiety in a couple of minutes. I just have to worry. I have to practice patience. I have to just, okay, let it go. Be patient. Be patient. And 95% of the time, without any action on my part, just by me sitting on my hands and being patient, a problem will resolve itself. You know? But patience, I wish, now again, please, I've just talked about, I don't change anything in the book now. And I love the part about alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. And I really believe that because I've witnessed it in my life. I know how alcoholism is cunning, baffling, and powerful. I still feel it. I still see. I thought about getting loaded today. It was a beautiful spring day. It crossed my mind just for a moment. People that say it doesn't cross their mind, I don't know. I don't know about that. No. But the cunning, baffling, powerful, and patient. I have to remember that the disease is alive and well inside of my head, and it's very patient. And with 15 and a half years sober, or whatever the days are, I have it written down in here, 5,000 some odd days, or whatever it is. It's one day at a time, and I got to remember that if I drink, I'm screwed. And you know, my experience about the disease being progressive, you know, And with my insanity background, Jiminy Christmas, it would get ugly fast. Well, I'd probably die. Worse than that, I'd probably be miserable for 5 or 6 years before I died. We had a guy in the Burbank group, Johnny Sawyer, who was a dinosaur, or lovingly referred to as a dinosaur. And I was very lucky because he would go to a lot of morning meetings, and I've always been a morning guy, and I got to be around him. And at first, I didn't know who Johnny Sawyer was. I looked at this old coot. This guy used to take his teeth out and put in some Copenhagen, you know. And I thought, oh. For the first few months, I thought he was a homeless guy that they just let come in. And I thought they let him mop the floors. I didn't realize that he had 35 years of sobriety, and the guy was willing to be of service and willing to mop the floors. Johnny Sawyer always used to talk about the fact that he found a life in AA that he found acceptable to him. And that's me. I found a life in AA I find very, very acceptable. One more thing. God, I could talk for a while, but I do need to end here. Hank told me one time when I was 5 years sober, he waited till I was 5 years. I don't know why. A lot of people waited a little while to tell me stuff. Maybe they heard me share. He came over one time, and I'm not a guy that remembers the pages in the book, but he goes, you know, there's a line in the book that he thinks is the most important line in the book. And he goes, it's buried in the middle of a chapter, in the middle of a page. And it says we have a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And you know, it was like the way he said it, I believed him, and I thought about it, and you know, just daily contact with God. And I am so, you know, and I don't do it. It's an ideal. It's an ideal. I practice. Sometimes I lose my way. Sometimes I drift away from God. Sometimes I'll open up my daily meditation book and I'm finding myself just staring at the words. But that's okay. That's okay. You know, I'm staying sober and I'm going to get back on the beam. Not that I'm off the beam now, but I'm just saying, you know, to the best of my ability, I stay on the beam. Because what I have is a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And if I remember what I have a reprieve from, it was pretty poor for me. The fun was over. The party was long gone. It wasn't a party. When people say, oh, they were partying. My partying years lasted a couple of years, and then it was just on to a good old-fashioned day in and day out poisoning. And that's what I have a reprieve from. And I'm so tickled. I'm so tickled, and I know my dad is tickled. I know my wife is tickled. My friends are tickled. My brother is tickled. His family's tickled. The cop is tickled. The only guy who's not tickled is the guy that runs the seasoning shop. Pardon my French, but fuck him. Anyway, guys, Mike and the crew, thank you for having me come out and share. It's really cool. And you guys run a very close second to Burbank as being the sobriety capital of the world. Thank you very much.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.